Willis's approach is not specific to Trump. She's deployed this powerful law in other untraditional ways, even before she rose to this job. Which brings us to this special report for you tonight, because if Willis is suddenly now a prominent name for news viewers, for people in MAGA households where Trump's been attacking her, now that she's the prosecutor going first on the coup cases, her entire record and approach also matter. It can inform how these trials go, whether she starts racking up a winning streak on her way to defendant Trump or hits hurdles in a strategy that charges high and wide. I could tell you Willis used this same charging approach in a case some lawyers would not have brought as a RICO charge when she went after teachers and administrators over a wide-ranging school cheating scheme. Now, Willis led that prosecution, indicting teachers as a RICO enterprise. And while that was a somewhat unusual approach, she gave a fiery set of opening arguments laying out how she viewed, and thus the prosecutor's office viewed, the scheme's victims as clearly taken advantage of by RICO abuse, and that those victims included children.
Widespread cheating.
That's at the heart of the state's case, a cheating culture, conspiracy.
And to create a false impression of academic success for many students in the Atlanta public school system.
In the nearly 3-hour opening, Prosecutor Fani Willis talked of failing students and frustrated parents.
She wants extra services for her daughter, extra tutoring and extra services that she's entitled to. But she can't get them because when you look at the CRCT scores, it says this child doesn't need them. She's meeting and exceeding the expectations.
That's what it sounds like when Willis is bringing a case. That record there is newly relevant right now because you don't have to be a Trump apologist or a school cheating apologist to question whether that legal theory was too fierce. And there are prosecutors who are accused of overcharging cases simply to stoke fear and leverage to get pleas out of that overcharging. In Atlanta, we can tell you some questioned whether throwing the book at teachers who had no criminal record was the proportionate response to cheating, even if it was an ethics problem in schools. The case shows how today's RICO defendants could also run out the clock, because we should note that whole trial, it ran 8 months. Now, by 2020, Willis was running to take over the DA's office from her boss, incumbent DA Paul Howard, who had 2 decades of experience but was facing questions about financial improprieties. Willis seized on that. She campaigned on cleaning up the office and boldly argued that her boss represented the corrupt ways of the past, which powered her victory. Willis has brought 11 RICO cases, including a large prosecution of an alleged Atlanta street gang that, unlike the Trump case, has seen those defendants put in jail before trial. So both men you see on the screen here are defendants for the same RICO charge in the same place by the same DA. One is in prison, presumed innocent but incarcerated. The other, of course, roams free. That case also controversial because Willis cited apparent fiction and song lyrics as truthful evidence, drawing criticism from both free speech advocates, civil libertarians, and civil rights leaders who said that approach, along with other racial discrepancies in the jurisdiction, were wrong, that black defendants were not being treated fairly, a double standard that, of course, relates to Atlanta's history as well, and who is incarcerated before trial in the bond system. I can tell you Willis has faced down those critics, vehemently pushing back on the idea that anything about her work or her background would accept any discrimination.
I'm an HBCU graduate, Howard University Bison. My father is a former, and I guess always, a Black Panther. I take a lot of pride in being black in America.
And in our special report here, this is a significant part of her history, part of it that she, of course, brings up, but also helps you show a little bit of who she are and who she is and how she got to this place. Because her father was a member of the Black Panther Party at one point, seen as a militant and often anti-law enforcement group. His legal career was on the other side of what Willis does now, a former Black Panther, a criminal defense lawyer representing defendants against prosecutors, as the New York Times reports. We actually found footage of Mr. Willis, a rising advocate in that movement, We're going to put it in the context of that era because he was discussing how people that he worked with in that civil rights resistance saw police like LAPD as the enemy and how he was inspired by Malcolm X and MLK.
We considered LAPD to be the enemy. We thought that they were nothing but trouble. They weren't there to help us as supposed to do because we just saw them as an occupying army. I have met two prophets in my life, two prophets.
We want freedom by any means necessary.
I met Martin Luther King and I met Malcolm X.
We want justice by any means necessary. We want equality by any means necessary.
Dr. King could get us so riled up. He had charisma. I don't know how to explain it, okay? You just believed in him.
We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop.
That view, what you hear there, was a formative influence on Willis as a parent and a lawyer. In fact, Fani Willis first learned about court from that defense side of the table. She went with her dad to the courthouse often, as early as elementary school, the Times reports, an exposure and guidance that was crucial. And she emphasized that she was raised by a single father, and so her heart is always with fathers, she has said. She went from that childhood talk of being in the courtroom, she talked about wanting to be a judge in one of the articles we checked, to then go on to attend Howard and then Emory Law, and then graduating in '96, she was in private practice before joining the DA's office. Her time in that office has drawn respect from peers who saw her as a no-nonsense prosecutor, a workaholic on complex cases. Another colleague said she proved to be, quote, a very good litigator while presenting murder cases because of her courtroom demeanor, her style, very dogged, very aggressive, end quote. So by history and most accounts, Willis came into this office more prepared than most. She grew up in the courtrooms around her father. She had the breadth of perspectives from that defense side of the table and the skepticism of law enforcement in civil rights at the time to what she did, which was obviously develop her own approach as a member of law enforcement, bringing these cases and then the victorious campaign for office. And from all the information we have, she was ready to begin this post with that focus, with what she talked about on the campaign trail, what I showed you tonight. Bringing cases against crime, dealing with violence, dealing with gangs, in which she identified as an Atlanta gang problem, and using that racketeering law. There wasn't any public sign that Donald Trump's losing quest to stay in power was going to end up in her portfolio, or even those last frantic demands that Georgia officials should help him steal the election, that would snowball into a wider plot, and then an insurrection, and then an interstate conspiracy. But history has its own momentum. Think about this. Willis was literally sworn in on January 1st, 2021. The next day, then outgoing President Trump and his chief of staff solicited actions to steal valid, lawful votes in Georgia's election. It was captured on tape, the infamous call that we'll play a little bit of, and that occurred, think about this, on this new DA Willis's first full day on the job after being sworn in. It is now part of the evidence that she, as the new DA, used to indict and book these RICO defendants.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
January 2nd. A lot of the rest is now well known. I'm not going to go through the rest of what happened after that in the same detail in our report. How what was initially cast by some as just thwarted calls or a one-day riot is actually this long-running set of plots stretching from the Trump White House to lawyers to those efforts on the ground. Several of these plots, as you see here in Georgia, are now indicted. The evidence and the nature of these coup plots did emerge over time. It was not all immediately clear. Most things aren't immediately clear, and if you think you understand something immediately, that may be a sign you don't understand all of it. We learned about these long-running plots through investigations, reporting, interviews, the House committee probe, which advanced a lot of this and is cited by the DA at times in that set of RICO charges, and then ultimately, the update is these plots have been indicted as conspiracies and racketeering, and that is because of two people, two prosecutors. That is not a structural thing or a macro thing or a fate thing. That choice to do what had never been done before as a matter of history and precedent is that two prosecutors decided this was a time to act and not defer. And if that meant making precedent, so be it. If it meant risking their reputations, their legal careers, if the thing goes sideways, if it meant risking how they're viewed by those peers, in her case, I'm praising her, so be it. Willis vowed she was going to do the, quote, right thing no matter how long it took or what public scrutiny came.
I don't care if the world is watching. I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. And here we are. It's really striking because we look at the big, big picture. We look at the macro, what I mentioned, whether that's the structural way that the system works, why campaigns and elections swing back and forth, things that are completely out of any individual's control, like macroeconomy or what other countries are doing. But this moment in history, which connects with what the President of the United States, Joe Biden, warned about today, this question of whether there will be full facts, evidence, truth, accountability, and nonpartisan rule of law over the people who were caught trying to steal the election, as some of them now run to try to take power again, this is up to a very small number of people. We did a special report, you might recall, about Jack Smith and his history on this, and now we present this to you to understand where this particular DA has come from, because more than anyone else in the nation, these two prosecutors, and with the first coup case coming, this DA Willis RICO case starting next month, these are the people who have risked a lot because they say they have the goods and the evidence of the conspiracy or the racketeering to overthrow the government, and they say they won't stop till they bring their case and prove their case and convict these defendants so that they go to prison rather than back into government.